Welcome back to Man vs. Meeple, the show where we talk about everything board game related. I am Jeremy Salinas, and today we're going to be talking about a historical game from Stronghold Games. It's called Sola Fide by Jason Matthews and Christian Leonard. Two very, very good designers from games like Campaign Manager, 1960, and even the big Twilight Struggle.
One Founding Fathers,
which is one of my favorite by them by far. So this is all about Catholics versus Protestants, which is a weird subject matter, but that's what the game is typically about.
Reformation for sure.
Yeah, so it is a card-driven area control style game that lives and dies by the card drafting itself.
Absolutely.
And how good you are at drafting cards. So in the game, players are attempting to either install Reformation into the Holy Roman Empire or to seek to prevent it, basically.
Right.
The game is represented by 10 Holy Roman circles, which are the tiles that you see here. Each tile has a victory point, or a number of victory points that it is worth. You're going to be trying to claim these tiles onto your side. In order to do that, you're going to want to install either Catholicism or the Protestants onto the board in an area control style manner. Each board has a track on the side, which is either the nobility or the commoners.
Yeah, and this is the kind of a cool aspect of the game. It's basic area control at its heart, but this track, when you shift it up and down, it's going to determine which side of the circle, determines the winner of it and who gets to take it.
And that's called the dominant side and the subordinate side.
Right.
So if it's on the commoner side, that side is dominant, and the other side is the subordinate. If it shifts over to the nobility, that side is dominant and the other side is subordinate. So a lot of the cards that you use reference that name.
Yeah, they use that terminology. They use the nobility and the commoner terminology. Right. There's a lot of different ways to shift that. There's a lot of different ways to get
tokens onto there.
Tokens onto the board
as well. That's called converting. And by converting, you're going to be taking your token and placing it on one of these area control areas, trying to get all of your color on one side, on the dominant side.
Right, and what's cool is all of the territories, they represent territories historically that were either probably favored the Catholic Church or the Protestants. So there's going to be different sides that have a little bit more native red. So when you see the colors on the board, you have that. So for instance, right here, there's two Catholic spots and two Protestant spots and one neutral spot.
Right.
So you really just need to convert 3 other spots to get that in your favor.
Right. This token will start on the board in a very particular area. It says right on the board where it starts. There are also green tokens, and this is called the Disputation token. This can be placed onto the board with particular cards. It simply goes on the center of the board, and if that board is claimed by the player where it is, they get one of these green tokens, and that's an extra victory point when the tile is claimed. There is also bonus cards. Anytime that you claim a tile by having the dominant side in all of your area control, you take the tile physically, put it on your side of the board, and you get to enact one of these bonus abilities. And that's either converting territory, drawing extra cards, shifting alignment up and down. And then that card that you've used gets shuffled back into the deck, so you don't know which of the cards could come up next. So the game itself, you're going to start off, if you look at these cards here, they have circles around them. So each of the 2 players is either going to play the Catholics or the Protestants. They're going to start with 15 cards that have the circle around them.
That's the base game.
That's the base game, and it kind of teaches you all the cards included either teach you how to convert or how to shift alignment in there, or how to use the token to get him on there.
And those, if you play that way, both decks mirror each other pretty closely, with a few little differences that add a little bit of asymmetry.
Yeah,
the asymmetry really comes into play when you use the draft to play the game,
and the faction that you use. The Catholic faction has a militaristic side to it. Anytime that they play a card that has a military symbol, which is the 2 crossed swords, the Protestant player gets to roll a die and use a cheat sheet to figure out a bonus that they would get, because obviously they don't like military in the Catholic Church. But so when you don't play the base game, you actually get to draft, and that's where kind of the theme and the ability of knowing how to play the game well really comes into play.
Well, and the game gets a lot better that way, too, for sure.
You will take all 45 cards in your deck, and you're going to take the top 3 cards. You're going to pick one of those cards to throw into your deck permanently, and the other 2 get trashed and won't be used for the game. You're going to do that until you have 15 cards in your hand, that will be your deck for the entire game. These cards will be used and cycled, so you'll keep using these through the course of the game.
It is definitely one of those games where you have a tight little deck of cards, so you're cycling through and really trying to. You get a feel for what cards you have in your deck. You know it's easier to know what's been played, what's coming up.
Right.
It's also easier for your opponent to know that about your cards too if they've kind of paid attention.
Right. So how the game plays is that each player is going to draw 3 of their cards at the start of the game, and on your turn you get one of 2 actions. You either get to draw a card or you get to play a card. If you draw a card, you simply draw it up in your hand, and the other player gets to go. When you play a card, the cards do a variety of different things. As we said, it can move the token to the one of the 2 sides and shift that power, that alignment. You can convert territories by either placing your token onto the board or removing other players' tokens from the board.
Right, and there's some that just allow you to draw like 3 cards, which is also quite powerful. Maybe draw 2 cards, play one of them immediately. And then, aside from those, which I think both factions have, there's a lot of very unique cards. I know the Protestant deck, which I've played with a lot, there are some cards that allow you to convert all neutral locations on any given territory, which can really make some big shifts. And on the flip side, the Catholics have some pretty big cards too, where they're allowed to cycle through their cards, get rid of some cards, and make some pretty big shifts on one side or the other of a territory.
Right. So if at any point in the game you have dominance in one of the 2 locations and you have all the areas controlled, you pick up that tile, put it in your tableau, and then all the tiles that are below it come into play. And you'll keep playing through the game, cycling through your deck until all the tiles have been claimed. And that triggers the end of the game. You're going to add up all the victory points from the tiles you claimed and any of these green 1-point tokens that you've claimed from the token there.
The victory points are pretty straightforward too. There's only 7-point tiles and 5-point tiles. So, I mean, it comes very close to being a game of who got the most tiles, unless you got a lot of the 5s instead of the 7s. But generally speaking, if someone has a big stack of tiles and you have 2 tiles, you lost.
Yeah, the crux of this game, and I'll get into the pros and cons, the crux of this game really boils down to your ability to play the game multiple times and understand the cards so you can draft properly. If you have a poor draft or you don't know how to play the game properly, that you're not getting the cards that can shift from dominant to subordinate side or convert dominant and subordinate side, plus being able to cycle your deck, you're going to be in a heap of trouble.
And that's the one thing I'd say about one pro for playing the basic game, which I don't think we'd ever play again. Ever.
No.
The draft is key. But the basic game is, almost 1, maybe even 2 plays before you can get a sense for like, okay, I see how a lot of these standard cards work. I get a sense for how many of those I probably will want in my deck.
Right.
But when it comes to that first draft, the first time we did it, you're going through, that's where it really gets fun because you're seeing cards for the first time that have some pretty significant powers. So you're thinking, oh, wow, that's really cool. Take that.
Yeah.
And then I found 3/4 of the way through my draft, I'd taken very little convert cards.
Right.
So I had to spend the rest of my draft taking convert so that I could do that.
Yeah, and not only that, but some of the cards that you drafted for the Protestant side, as you said, that convert neutral territories, they can become dead cards in your hand midway through the game.
Yeah, they're very powerful when and if you can use them, because there are some of those that I put in there that I failed to use to win the tile. You were able to sneak in there and get it. And then, like Jeremy said, I had 3 of those cards that serve no other purpose than to do that. So once the tile's off the board, it's pretty much pointless to have in your deck, and it just clogs up your deck.
Beyond that, the game for me is just it's really dry and it feels like a tennis match. I think we may have already mentioned that before. There's portions of the game where you cycle through your hand and you get the right combination of cards and you put a token on there and you're 1 spot away from winning, and then on their turn they just remove the token. And then you have to go all the way back through that process again in order to try to get that tile. And by then it just feels less strategic and more luck based on the cards that you happen to draft into and the cards you happen to draw into.
I'd agree with that. I think at first, and I think if you're a player who enjoys just a one-on-one back and forth like that, you probably this game would be right up your alley. I do think though, like you said, as it goes on, at first you're like, ooh, this is a great back and forth. But then eventually you're like, well, I'm going to put this here, and let's hope that you don't have a card to take it right off.
Right.
But oftentimes you do, and then it just kind of goes back and forth and back and forth. That happens even more when you've eliminated a lot of the tiles
Yeah.
and you're really either down to the last tile, but even depending on how you work your way through, you can have only 2 tiles out at a time at some
points.
in some cases. At which point it really just becomes this little battle between each of them. You can either fight over one, or I'll let Jeremy take that one and sacrifice it, and I'll go focus over here and hopefully get it before he comes over and
Let's
takes
speak
it.
about that last tile. When it gets down to that last tile, it can become cumbersome trying to get that one to work.
It really
you
did.
You can play this game. It says 45 minutes, but it lasts probably more like an hour to get through the game. And that last 15 minutes of the hour is basically that
last
single
tile.
last tile.
Yeah, that is, I would say probably the one biggest con of the game is when it comes down to that single last tile. I could totally see some people coming up with some variants. I mean, we even thought about it ourselves as we
Yeah.
were fighting over that last tile, and it was just back and forth. That one really came down to getting the exact right cards in your hand to be the guy to be able to shift it right in the right time. And on some level, that's kind of interesting and fun. But like Jeremy said, on another level, it really feels very luck driven at the very end.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things I do like about the game are the cards. I have to say, with 45 unique cards, every single one of these cards is different. They all do something different for the Protestants and the Catholics alike.
And with multiple plays, too, you can draft differently. So Jeremy might expect me to use those cards we mentioned where I can shift all the neutrals. But my next game, I might say, I'm not going to use any of those.
Yeah.
So he's maybe prepared his draft to account for that.
Yeah.
And I didn't go there.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of a guessing game with each other when you're setting up your deck.
Yeah, I mean, I love that portion. I love the variability there, but I also think that's a deterrent for people that just want to come in and play it once or twice. You have to be committed to playing this game to understand the way that these cards work together.
Absolutely. The first time player is going to look at if you drafted your first time playing this game.
Good luck.
Yeah, we're seasoned gamers, and we wouldn't even really fully appreciate what some of those things meant. So you do have to play that basic game. So if you get through that and then get through a couple games with the draft, then the draft makes a lot more sense. But like Jeremy said, you have to be committed to this game and play it frequently. It's kind of like almost chess, really learning a game and then playing it competitively with a friend.
Yeah. So guys, that is Sola Fide. Maybe not hit the perfect mark for both of us, but this guy is in no trouble. He made Terraforming Mars, all right, Great Western Trail, Fabled Fruit, some really good games this year from
Stronghold's had a great run this year.
So go check it out. Make sure you guys make comments below in this YouTube channel. Subscribe to us, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. And check us out next time on Man vs. Meeple.
Bye-bye.
Season 1 of Man vs. Meeple is sponsored by TMG Games, publisher of great games like Yokohama, Guilds of London, and the soon-to-be-released Colosseum.